Hello, everybody. This is the Tokyo FinTech podcast. I'm Norbert Gierke from Tokyo FinTech, and I welcome to the Makoto Takemiya from Soramitsu. Takemiya-san, how are you today?
I'm doing good. I just got back to Japan last night, so I'm still a little bit dizzy from riding on the plane, but it's okay.
I've seen lots of posts. There was Vienna, Doha, Cambodia, all on the way in a very short time frame. So accruing lots of air miles, it seems like.
Yeah, no, I have to go to a lot of places because we have a distributed team. So my company right now is active in 5 countries, and so I have to always go to places and hold people's hands and make sure that everything is going well. And but it's interesting. I see a lot of potential, especially from here on out for the next year. I think from now for the next 2 years, it's going to be quite a roller coaster ride in fintech and in blockchain especially. So it's an exciting time to be in this space.
Absolutely, and I think I've seen you once 2 years ago giving a presentation. It was probably more the early days of Soramitsu, and so much has happened. But maybe we start at the beginning, kind of with the origin story. So how did you come to Japan in the first place?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So I came to Japan first in the early 2000s, and then later I came, I guess it's 2007 for a conference. I presented an academic conference in Kyoto, and sitting next to me at the conference dinner was a researcher from NEC, and so he was interested in the work I was doing at the time, which was different things with machine learning, combinatorial optimization problems, and he asked me if I wanted to do my master's thesis working at his lab. So that was in Kyoto, Japan. So I went to work at NEC for about 10 months at the Kansai Kenkyusho. In Kyoto, near Kyoto Prefecture, actually in Ikoma city of Nara Prefecture, and I liked it so much. I started doing different martial arts. So already I had done some Iaido when I was in the United States, and also Aikido. And when I came to Japan, I used the opportunity to study Kyudo, which is Japanese archery, and that was, to me, it was very beautiful and inspiring, and so. It was mainly because of that I wanted to actually stay in Japan. And so I looked around for a job, and then after I graduated with my master's, I just came to Kyoto Prefecture to work at ATR, which is it's a very interesting research lab that does many different things. So we had people working on wireless data transmission and sensors for self-driving cars, and we were doing brain research. So we studied the human brain as part of the Department of Neuroinformatics, and my boss was Professor Kamitani, who was really a leader in this space internationally. And we studied a lot about dreams, and I worked on doing different analytics software because I was a computer scientist and I had the most computer science training in the lab. And so we did some really interesting work and published many papers on it. And then partway through this period, two things happened. One, in 2013, I became interested in Bitcoin. I even wrote a bot in Python to trade on Mt. Gox for a while.
Seriously?
Yeah, it didn't work out very well. But that kind of opened the door to the whole blockchain space. Mm-hmm. I saw that money can be turned into digital data, which is really powerful because once it becomes data, it opens the door to a new type of handling. You don't have to have people handle it all. It's not just a ledger entry. There's no input error if you type in numbers. So when you send money to someone using Bitcoin, they get it for all intents and purposes fairly instantly. Mm-hmm. It takes some time, but it's just like sending an email. So you don't have to go to the bank and wait in line, fill out a form that takes an hour, and then pay $70 to do an international transfer. You can just do it in a few seconds, which to me was it's like, wow, this is amazing. So I got into that. Then along the way, I got into different cryptocurrencies, altcoins, right? So different things were interesting, like Peercoin, for instance, had like this hybrid proof of stake system. And then NXT came out at the end of 2013, and that was interesting because it's like a pure proof of stake. And I realized you don't need mining to secure a blockchain network and to distribute consensus. You can do this without actually wasting a lot of electricity, which is great because I've always been an environmentalist. Since high school, really, I was in the environmental club at school and did lots of advocacy, I guess. So that kind of got me looking into altcoins and what was going on, and it was through this search for the next big thing that I got into the community with NEM for a while, and I worked on their consensus algorithm, which I think is still a great algorithm. After all these years, there hasn't been any major problems with proof of importance. And then along the way, I met many of the people in the Tokyo crypto community. One of them was Jimmy Homa, the head of the Japan Digital Asset Association, or Association of Digital Assets, and that was one of the important turning points in my life, I guess, in that he introduced me to a lot of people that I hadn't met before in Japan in the crypto space, because I had lived this whole time in Nara, which is it's very far away from anything going on. So it's very isolated. And so when I came to Tokyo and met all these people, Vitalik came to Japan during this time, and Gavin came during this time, and all these people were coming. So it's quite interesting for me. And so through that, I met, through Homa-san, I met two of my co-founders for Soramitsu. One was Matsu Ikke. He's a venture capitalist in Kyoto, and he has a PhD in medicine and used to work at a securities company, Yamaichi Shoken. And also I met Okada-san, so Ryu Okada. He's one of my co-founders, and we worked as a co-CEO for 3 years. And so we decided we had this shared passion for democratizing money as digital data, really, with blockchain, and also for helping with things like compliance. So like having like a digital identity and automating a lot of processes that are done by hand. And so we started Soramitsu in February of 2016, and we were just the three of us for the longest time. Actually, the first employee we hired, I guess, was a designer, which is an interesting decision, I think. But now we're around 70 people in, like I said, 5 different countries, and we do a lot. Maybe I'll just say a couple of things personally. So one of the things that happened while I was at ATR was getting into Bitcoin and blockchain in 2013. Another thing that happened was, so I decided to become a Japanese citizen. So I went through the non-trivial process of applying for citizenship, and finally I was accepted, I guess in 2015, and that's when I was kind of able to go off on my own and do my own things, because I didn't need to have a visa anymore.
Was that the pull of the Japanese culture, or you wanted to avoid kind of the US citizenship? Quite honestly, was it pull or push?
No. I mean, I never disliked the US. I mean, it's not as high standard of living as Japan, I think, and so that's one of the reasons Japan, I think, has a much higher standard of living. But even just more, I would say, culturally or spiritually, Japan is a much better fit for me. So I was just so enamored of the country, through martial arts and philosophy, reading books like Heiho Kadensho from by Yagyu, and the sword instructor from Tokugawa Shogun, and it was so interesting. So I read all this, and I just realized that, wow, there's so much deep philosophy here. And through studying martial arts and Japanese, I guess you could say etiquette or way of doing things is very interesting. And I just realized there's a a different side to the story. So Steve Jobs in his biography, he talked a lot about using LSD and how it showed him there's another side to the world. And for me, I didn't need LSD. Just coming to Japan and experiencing martial arts gave a glimpse of, I think, a deeper truth in the universe. And that's really what motivated me to become a citizen of Japan, which I think a lot of people who are born here maybe don't see all that. It's too obvious or something. But when you actually go overseas, which I do a lot nowadays, because I live overseas right now most of the time, and it shows you that Japan's actually a very special place. And if it wasn't for business, I would love to just stay here and do my own thing. But
how do you think kind of this philosophy impacts how you conduct business and how you lead your company?
It has a big impact. So I'm not what I think many people would consider a businessman. I'm more of a I don't know. I'm more of an engineer in my mindset. So I try to build a new world, and I guess my viewpoint of the world is not to make a lot of money, but really to do something else. Pursuing money is really limited scope. I used to play a lot of video games when I was a kid, and one of the games was this cool game. I forget the name of it even, but you would go and do all these missions and stuff in space, and you get money and you can upgrade your ship, and then suddenly the story ends. You finish the story, but you can still fly around the areas you're in, and you can still make money, but there's nothing you can use the money for. It's just numbers on the screen. And actually the real world is like that too. You can make a lot of money and it just ends up to be numbers, and it doesn't matter if you don't make an impact, because someday the game ends and it doesn't mean anything anymore.
I mean, I think this comes through in how I would see Soramitsu from the outside, because quite honestly, especially over the last 2 years and obviously the 2017 craziness in crypto, it seemed like so many companies were focused on marketing, right, and pushing a coin, etc. Well, it seems like over the 2 years that I've known Soramitsu, it felt a bit like heads down, building things and changing the world, as you say, but not so much marketing. And it feels like there's so many things that your team has done, and maybe you're all coming a bit more out into the public and actually advertising what you've done. But also because you said your original approach was to digitize money, but actually Soramitsu didn't have a coin when you started, right? It was like building Iroha. And so talk a bit about like kind of what you built first, and then how we got into kind of getting Iroha built and then accepted as part of Hyperledger, which was like big coming out party if you consider kind of the other contributors to Hyperledger like global companies.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we spent a lot of effort on just building things, and we work a lot with institutions directly. So we didn't see the need to do a lot of I guess targeted or untargeted mass advertising. So we just would go to conferences, but specialized conferences like places like Cybos, places like that. So. We focused a lot on building things. The first product that we wanted to build was a digital identity product. And when we got to start building it, we realized there's really no blockchain that's suitable for what we wanted. So we went out and started to build our own blockchain. Well, partly because I also was frustrated with the state of the art in blockchain technology. So there's a lot of problems with every platform, really. Every platform has its own trade-offs, and I thought that we could make our own system that had potentially less trade-offs, at least for our use cases. So that's kind of how we started on Iroha. And of course, Iroha is named after the panagram in Japanese language, the Iroha no Uta. It's a poem in Japanese that uses all the sounds of the language once. And it's really quite fascinating. So Japanese has a couple of these. Amitsuchi is another one. But Iroha is a beautiful idea that you could create this create this, I would guess, one, not to use Polkadot's term, but like substrate of where you could build all these different applications out of. And we want to make it really easy. So instead of building your own smart contracts and then everyone executing them, we would just have these core commands that are predefined. And because they're predefined and in the core of the system, they're really fast. So if you want to create an asset, you just create an asset. If you want to transfer an asset, you transfer the asset. And we just want to make it really easy to use. So you get less flexibility, but you get these basic pieces, which you can then combine kind of like Legos into like a more complex structure. So that was Iroha. But, we never were really a platform company. So the platform was always a means to an end. So our goals were to create applications. So one of them is an identity system, and we just put out a press release a couple weeks ago. We did a POC with Bank Central Asia, which is one of the largest banks in Indonesia, using a decentralized identity protocol on blockchain to standardize group identity. So this was actually a really interesting project because it allows the users to have some form of self-sovereignty in their own information, but at the same time allows banks and financial institutions to do some automated reasoning on who is this identity, what are their actions in the system, and to actually do things like data fusion, where you can combine information from different companies about one individual, which can help reduce risk and help with compliance. And this can help with things like international payments. So this is another passion that I really think we can fix. In South Asia and in Africa, a lot of times when you want to do trade with a neighboring country, you have to convert first to the dollar, and then you convert to the other target currency because there's not enough liquidity. And so we're working on an interbank payment network as well, using a stablecoin that's based on another project we're doing called Sora. But this stablecoin is interesting because it is value in and of itself. It's like Bitcoin, where if you send it to someone, it has value in itself. But we're focusing mainly on using this for interbank payments, so in the back end. So from the user's perspective, they only see maybe it's $1 or euro, but behind the scenes, you're actually using blockchain-based token, which is an interesting idea. This hasn't gone live yet, but we're in talks with several banks to. That's why I have to keep traveling everywhere about this. So that's a little bit of what we've done over the years. We've of course done many POCs in Japan and abroad on. Actually, with a lot of insurance companies, I'm not sure why, but insurance companies have been very interested in blockchain technology. So we've done POCs related to things like creating new types of products that can be done, or sharing information about some individual to prevent fraud. This can help with compliance too. Like, for example, in some countries, like in Cambodia, insurance payouts over $10,000 have to be reported to the central bank. This is to prevent things like money laundering and things like that. So, if you have an automated system, you can take people out of the equation, and there's one less variable to account for.
Right. Let's unpack this a bit. So there are different dimensions. I think, looking at maybe from the Japan perspective first, so especially insurance companies tend to be very conservative, and so actually getting in and doing work with them is already a great first step. Now, how far, in your view, are they from actually going beyond the POC and then deploying something or taking it into the market or product kind of development cycle?
Yeah, that's a good question. I honestly think that a lot of the companies are very far from going to production because it is a regulated activity and you have to get regulatory approval. And a lot of people are just a little bit, too busy, or they can't make the business case to go to the regulator and talk about it. But other places do seem to be making progress, though. Another problem with insurance is that there's a lot of well, from the outside you would see it as like waste, but it's there for a reason. So it's there because some entities are making money from this, and it's their business model, and it's really hard to disrupt that because there's a lot of power with those entities. So, yeah.
And so, also in the context of blockchain, you described Indonesia. We'll get to kind of Cambodia later, but is, in your view, blockchain adaptation much easier in the developing world, where kind of institutional structures don't exist yet and you don't need to unwind something, versus industrial world where you kind of need to overcome the existing institutions?
Well, the stereotype is really that the developing world has more needs, and so they're more likely to take a risk on new technology. And to a point, that's true. There are a lot of inefficiencies and structural problems in the developing world, though, and that does it presents different challenges. So it's, in many ways, doing business in a place like Europe or America or Japan is easier, a lot easier, because you have a lot of structure, and from business standpoints, things are more predictable. It does take a certain amount of resilience and time to work in countries like Japan, because it's not the fastest moving place for business, especially FinTech innovation. It's one of the... There's an article that came out, I think I saw it in your message, that Japan actually is ranking very low in FinTech adoption. So it will change. It's all about the business case, and if you can make a business case, it makes sense. But the problem is without investing a lot of money to build something, it's hard to actually make or calculate the business case. A lot of times you have to build it and then prove that it works. That being said, there's still a lot of waste in Japan. I mean, look at if banks go out to make a new banking system or something, it's not like 1 to 2 million like you would have with blockchain tech. It's like 100 to 200 million, which is really unbelievable. Yeah.
Yes. And so coming back kind of to the money side and what you described in Indonesia, it sounded a bit like for interbank payments, like a Ripple competitor or a JPM coin type of thing. Is that kind of the space you're in, and how do you do it differently and better than these?
Okay, so we have a few different, I would say, products. One is an identity product, which is a self-sovereign identity protocol. And I published a paper about this last year at the IEEE conference in Tokyo. And this is also incorporating things like image processing to extract information from an ID card that you scan, and then also doing things like liveness detection on a selfie to make sure that you're not faking who you are. So this is just a way to reduce risk. It's all probabilities game, and regulators don't like probabilities, but still, I mean, you can follow scientific methods of sampling, and you can reduce risk. So that's one product that we're trying to sell to different institutions. Another is what I call Soranet. So Soranet is a stablecoin-based interbank payment system, and this uses a blockchain-based token that we haven't released yet, but are going to. It's called ZOR or XOR, and this is part of a decentralized autonomous economic system called Sora, which is actually, the idea is very simple. So in Sora, we give the power of token creation to the community, and the community votes on how to allocate tokens. Our philosophy is that tokens should be allocated for productive uses, so things like new goods and services, which by definition expand the GDP of an economy. And so we just, it's an inflationary method, but, so is Bitcoin. Bitcoin mints about $10 million worth of Bitcoins per day, but this just goes to miners to pay for electricity and to slowly kill our world. So what we want to do is actually mint new tokens, but give it to new goods and services, so to people or companies who want to make products. So that's Sora. So Sora solves the problem of allocation of tokens in a decentralized economy, because it's like crowdfunded, wisdom of the crowd for how do you allocate tokens. And then for on top of that, you have the problem of stability of this token. So this token is going to be free floating, and like Bitcoin, it can change in value every day. So that's not really useful for a lot of financial applications.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do is we create another system on top of this or another token that is using some amount of ZOR in the background to provide value. But the amount of ZOR that is backing, I would say, each, let's say, euro worth of this stable coin would change with the exchange rate. So it's kind of like a dynamic function that will mint and demint ZOR to back some index of value. And this index of value can be freely defined. It doesn't have to be a fiat currency. It could be gold. It could be something like the Unidad de Fomento in Chile.
Okay.
So this is one of the things we want to do. And the cool implication of this is once you have this kind of, I guess, meta coin that is stable, you can instantly convert to any currency with 100% liquidity or infinite liquidity, because you don't have any market that you're executing this FX trade on. It's just a change in units, like converting from centimeter to inch. So that's that I think is a unique advantage that other people like Ripple or other interbank systems don't have. And of course, there's always questions like how do banks handle this? What are the regulations? And so these are hard issues, but it's something that we're working with a few different institutions on right now. It's a long-term project though. First, we have to release Sora. Actually, Sora is mostly done. We're going to start public testing of the app probably in a week or so. I keep trying to get my team to release it to the public, but we've been doing an internal test, and what you have is different projects that you can vote on, and you get votes. So every day, depending on your reputation in this economy or economic system, you get new votes. And reputation is calculated based on voting history. So if you vote for a project and it does well, you get more votes in the future. Also, there's a little bit of input as to the types of transactions you're doing. So just analysis of the blockchain transaction graph. And then the third is invitation. So inviting new users to this app gives you more reputation and hence more votes. You get more power on how to decide the allocation of new tokens. So, for example, there's a wine company called Vincero, which is in California. So they made wine, sparkling red wine, out of hand-picked organic grapes. And instead of doing like equity financing, they want to receive new tokens. And so instead of doing like a crowd sale and creating their own, altcoin or something, they just come to this community and they say, give us new tokens. Here's our project, here's what we can do, and then please vote for us. And so you can vote for the project, and then when it gets all the votes necessary, then the votes are turned into new tokens, really. And new tokens are minted and given to the project. And then it's up to the project to use it wisely and to contribute to the whole economy by selling its wine for ZOR, the token. So that's the basic idea for ZOR. So we take ZOR, and then on top of that we build applications for financial institutions and things like that. Because that I used to be a believer that maybe Bitcoin or something could take over the world, but after so many years I've become really jaded, I guess, and now I see that it's better to work in the system in another way. So to provide tools that solve problems people have. And unfortunately, waking up in the morning and wanting a new, magic internet money is not a problem that people have. People want, to solve some problem like, how do I send money to my parents, cheaply and in a few seconds without, going to a bank, filling out paperwork and spending a lot of money. So this is important for a lot of people who travel a lot or go overseas, kind of like me. For a while, I would send a lot of money to America using PayPal, and that's a terribly inefficient way to send money. The fees for the amounts that I was sending was like 20% or something. So it's very inefficient way to do it. And I hope that the tools that we build can improve the efficiency of the lives of normal people in society. And we see some of that in Cambodia with the system we're doing with the central bank.
How much can we talk about Cambodia in detail?
Yeah, we can talk a lot about it actually. So let's talk a little bit about Cambodia. So over 2 years ago, the central bank came to us and they were interested in working with us because they had seen Iroha and they wanted to especially Iroha was always focused on mobile applications. So making it easier for user-facing app developers to actually make secure apps for payments. And so in Cambodia, they wanted us to work on a retail settlement system for the populace. And so it was decided that Iroha was a good match for that because the effort that we had put in to the SDKs and for the user-facing apps. And so we started working on that over 2 years ago. It's been a long road. There's been a lot of work, and now we're starting a pilot internally in the country with 30 of the banks are joining, and it's quite an interesting project. I think in the future I'll be able to maybe talk more about it, but I'll just say for now that if the project's successful, it can really make a positive impact in the lives of a lot of people. And you said earlier that maybe in developing countries, people have more needs than in places like Japan. And that's true. So in Japan, we have a lot of digital money already, or digital payment methods. They might be expensive, but people also have more money here. But in Cambodia, they don't really. And so it's important to provide the tools that people need to.
What I understood from the Cambodia model is actually that the citizens get the account directly at the central bank, basically. Is that correct?
Well, it's a little bit more nuanced than that. So users of the app get accounts. You get accounts on the blockchain ledger that is held by the central bank, but they're all affiliated with some commercial bank or other institution. So the central banks try not to compete with the commercial banks, of course, because that would be destabilizing to the economy. So this is really a positive thing for commercial banks because they can expand their user base and provide new services and get, in the future, more money for reserves too, which can help give liquidity to the banking system, which is probably a good idea. I don't see the economy of South Asia doing too well if the Chinese economy goes down, and unfortunately, I think that's the direction.
Okay, so in the Cambodia model, although it's basically central bank ledger, but the intermediary function of the regional banks, commercial banks, is still maintained.
Yes, that's correct. Okay. And another interesting point is that in the model in Cambodia, the infrastructure is centralized. So the central bank has all the servers. They run the blockchain, basically. But the business logic is decentralized because each person has their own key. It's generated on their own phone and it never leaves their phone. You can't SIM swap someone because you won't have their key. So it's a very secure system, and it's something where even the central bank can't fake your transaction because you have your key, right? Central bank doesn't even have it. So it's kind of like a way to give more property rights to people. Still, I mean, there's a lot of things that has to be kept in. Thought of how do you handle things like illegal activity. So there's still provisions for with a court order for banks to freeze accounts, things like that had to be added. But that's easy to do in Iroha because we have permission system. But unfortunately, you do need a lot of rules like that because to comply with laws.
How about the safety of losing my keys? Obviously, if I lose my private key on Bitcoin and I lose my funds, is there kind of the safeguard and the backdoor in the Cambodia system that I can recover?
Yeah. So the good thing about having an affiliation with the bank is that the bank can still provide some services to you, like changing keys, for instance, if you need to. There's different levels of validation too. So if you don't validate yourself with the bank, then you're kind of out of luck if you lose everything and don't back up your recovery phrase and seed. But there's limits for the amount of money you can have in an unverified account. So it's not a huge practical issue. But yeah, in the future, well, I mean. So we're trying to use more things like multi-sig technology. One of my friends owns a company in Belgium called Sophito, and we've been looking at possibly integrating with their technology. So what they have is a wallet. They make a card, something like a credit card type of thing called Sugi card. So sugi.io is their website. But it's really cool. It's like a hardware wallet that's built into a credit card. And there's an app on the phone that you can sign transactions on the card using NFC and things like that. So that's potentially a good way for the masses to adopt crypto because people are already used to using cards, and that might be a good way forward, I think. So we're talking with them about doing something. The downside, of course, is that the price point is still a little bit high because it's kind of a custom chip that they made.
Right. How do you think kind of about the dystopian kind of version of the future? So if the central bank has access to kind of all your money on the blockchain, can basically control it, always in the context of this Chinese version of social credit score already, if you combine this with kind of money and you're misbehaving as a citizen and there's the switch where your money supply, basically your personal money gets switched off and you're unable to live basically.
Well, I'm a huge fan of the anime Psychopaths, so it sounds good. No, I'm joking, but yeah, so this is a big problem, and it's a problem that we have already because I mean, let's be honest, how much of your wealth is in cash? Not very much. Yeah, it's a hard issue. So I was actually in Wien. I wasn't able to attend, but I was in Wien during the FATF industry hearings on with FinTech industry, and they've been talking about putting out guidance for digital currencies and there's a lot of rules that don't really lend themselves well to cryptocurrencies. Like one of the rules in money transmission is you have to know the identity of who you send it to. But in Bitcoin, of course, you can send it to any address. Like you can even burn coins by sending it to an address no one has. And you can't really prove the absence of something. So it's really hard to provide the traditional rules. And at the same time, how important is identity? Really, I mean, from a philosophical standpoint, even if you're a so-called bad person, let's say terrorist, because we all know terrorists use Bitcoin and not cash. But let's say you're a terrorist and you want to buy a bottle of water. Does that really make the world a worse place? Buying bombs is bad, but even if you're not a terrorist, you shouldn't be buying bombs or potentially dangerous materials. So it seems to me that the correct focus is not on identity or who the customer is, but what the customer is doing. So I'm a huge fan of complete anonymity in payments, but at the same time have some kind of administration over money flows. So like if money is stolen, you shouldn't be able to get away with it. I mean, it's not good for society, and it's not good from a natural, from the natural order of things, where property ownership is a human right. So I think that unfortunately a lot of regulators don't know how to solve this, and so instead of doing research and trying to come up with new technology, they just say, oh, let's just know everyone's identity and then ask them in an ad hoc way what every transaction is for. So it doesn't really provide security because, bad people don't use banking systems. They use like Hawala and other types of ad hoc systems. And bad people don't always do bad things. They sometimes just want a glass of water or a hamburger. And it's a hard call, how do you do this? But I think the answer is in AI. And I think people are much more likely to give more information to a computer program than to people. Look at Gmail. Gmail reads every email you write and gives you targeted ads. And it's the same type of thing. But if there was a human at Google reading all your emails and giving you ads, you would be upset. But if it's a computer program, it's okay. And it should be the same thing for payments. You shouldn't have to do a lot of things manually. You shouldn't have compliance teams. It should be a computer program. And ideally, this computer program would be built by the regulators. The regulators would say, here's this program we developed. You don't have to do it yourself. Run this program on your transactions, and it will automatically block anything that we don't want to support. And that's a dangerous, thing as well. But you hope that you can find some trade-off in society, because you don't want necessarily bad people to get away with bad things, because there are really bad people in the world too. So yeah.
Let me ask another kind of future-related question, kind of with the communities that you're building with Sora as well, right? You're creating basically kind of an ecosystem that doesn't know boundaries. And so I think people who are interested, like the example of the vineyard that you had, and they can cluster together no matter where they are, and rather than just only being in a community of interest, it's an economic community that has economic power, possibly. And how will this square in the future with the notion of a nation state?
Okay, that's a good question. So with Sora, we want to create a one world economic system that, like you said, doesn't know any boundaries, or geographical boundaries. That's a good good question. How do you reconcile this with trade wars and nation states and things like that? It's hard, and I think it's not impossible, because you can still use something like Sora as a way to empower people to build new things, and I think in most reasonable countries that's fine. They won't have a problem with that. Governments usually want people to be productive and to contribute to society. I think that long term, we will necessarily see more of a breakdown in the distinction between nation states as a whole. I think it has to be that way because people have to collaborate more together. If someone wants to is capable of contributing to some country, like me coming to Japan and becoming a citizen, it took some time and effort, but people who can do that, I think, should be allowed to do it. I think that long term, a lot of the problems that we see in society and in the world are caused by, I guess you would say human ignorance and things like that. And I think that can be solved because human problems can be solved by humans. And I think the way to do this is actually, doing research, editing DNA. I'm totally for genetic research and empowering people to have more intelligence and maybe less greed and less violent tendencies. We're not apes anymore. I think it's time to stand up and liberate ourselves a little bit more. But that can only be done if we fix the bugs in our program. So I think that's the long-term solution. And once we have the better capabilities in our genetic code, we can then transform societies more. And I think we'll see that in our lifetime. I think that through through advances in AI and in computer processing, we'll be able to understand our DNA so well that we can actually, create better societies from this, ground up.
It might be your lifetime still. I'm a bit older, so we'll see. But that ultimately could mean that anybody who gets born today has a much higher chance of kind of fixing these defects and getting 150 years old or so.
Oh, come on, that's not very much. Most of the cells in your body are only a few weeks old. So your body is very young and new. So aging doesn't really make sense, and so we should solve this problem. But I think before we can solve that problem, we need to solve problems related to violence and greed, which we can hope that there's at least some genetic basis that we can work on to modify. And I think we'll be able to discover that as we study more about our complex programming.
So the future is a future of abundance, then?
The future, assuming we don't destroy ourselves first, you have to realize that we're in a very interesting stage in humanity because people are becoming more and more empowered individually. But at the same time, we don't have the abilities to manage this empowerment. That's one of the reasons why I think financial regulations are getting more and more strict. If you go back a few decades, you could easily make transactions and send money and you have anonymous bank accounts and things that are unheard of now. And I think compared with a few decades ago, people have so much more power. Like, look at your phone. With your phone and all the knowledge you have on it, you have a lot more power than even the president had like 50 years ago. And so that power also has responsibility, and unfortunately people are not responsible enough, and so governments and people in control have really felt the need to increase their control because maybe they feel like they're losing it. Maybe they should be losing it, I don't know. But you also have to empower the people to do better, and there's still a lot of people who are doing bad things, and terrible things happen around the world, even by so-called good guys in the world. You see a lot of just needless violence, and look at what humans are doing to elephants and rhinos and sharks. It's really disgusting, and we have to grow or evolve beyond that before we can really increase the freedom of everyone, I think.
So maybe in closing, we'll touch upon a little bit on the things that are coming out of Soramitsu in the near future already. If we go forward a year, 2 years from now, where do you see yourself and your company?
Maybe we'll be buying IBM, and no, I'm joking, but so I think my goal for the next 2 years is, I would like to expand the team some more. As a startup, we still don't have enough resources, even with 70 people. We could, given the project load we have, I would be happy with twice that. So we need to expand some more. We need to get more institutions using our projects. I haven't even really talked about D3, which is a decentralized digital depository for crypto assets that we're doing with Moscow Exchange Group and KDD, which is the CSD in Slovenia. So things like that project are just starting to go live. So this month we're going to launch the production network and start to issue the first. Some companies going to issue some commercial paper on this system. So I think that in 2 years, my first goal is, one, not to have any major problems. Maybe as a technologist, I need to not be so risk averse, but I'm still a Japanese citizen. And so I really don't like to take huge risk. So that's one of the reasons why we're moving very slow and steadily in everything we do. So one, no major problems or drama sounds good, but at the same time, we can't be afraid. We have to push the limits of technology and go farther. I was reading Richard Bronson's book, Finding My Virginity. I had the honor of meeting Richard in April on his private island in Necker Island. But in his book, he talked a little bit about the explosion of Spaceship Two, and that was I remember because I was in California at the time, and I think the guy who died was from my university. Well, not like someone I knew, but so Richard was talking about should he continue with pushing the boundaries of Virgin Galactic, like should he continue making these spaceships, and he decided to go ahead and continue. Yeah, that's the only way people make any progress is through pain and hardship and sacrifice. And I think it'll get better in the future because we'll be able to simulate a lot of things before they happen. And so we won't have to have a lot of these physical accidents. But a lot of the stuff we do in computer science is too complex to simulate. I forget who said it. They said that the universe is the most efficient simulation of the universe in the eyes of God. Is the guy who created set theory, I think, is the one who came up with that quote. But it's really true. The easiest way to know the future is to to just experience it, I guess. So yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to make a positive impact on the lives of millions of people. I want to release in Cambodia and get a significant amount of the population using it. I want to take the same system and have it work in other countries, and I want to have this really liberating international payment system where banks can instantly transfer payments to each other in any currency, because this will help different countries to collaborate together, and it will also help prevent what I think is an inefficient type of globalism. So things like the Eurozone, I think, are not as efficient as they could be. Using a scheme like ours, where you could instantly convert to any currency, would have allowed every European country to keep their own currency, and hence monetary policy too. And sometimes local decision makers make the best choices because they know a lot of idiosyncratic information that other people at a higher level may not see. In the future, these bounds will be partly removed by AI because within our lifetime, computers will be thousands of times or millions of times more capable of processing information than we are. So we don't really have to worry so much in the long-term view. This is just kind of an awkward age of humanity where we are going from one phase to another, I think.
We're moving towards singularity.
Yes, singularity, and that is why we also need digital money as well. That's not issued by a nation state, but issued by very clear mathematic rules.
And ultimately, I think, based on your description as well, most of the commerce will be between machines rather than between humans.
Yeah, no, well, so it depends on what you consider commerce. So in many ways, we already have this. So on stock exchanges, most trades are not done by
absolutely
individuals per se. That being said, if your car buys something, did you buy it or did your car buy it? That's always it's going to be interesting in the future to really make this distinction. I don't know if I have a good answer for that. I can tell you who doesn't, and that's the regulators. They're not close to being prepared.
Yes.
But the people, through education and proper experimentation will get there. So actually, we're a member of the Global Blockchain Business Council as well, and we spend quite a lot of effort with GBBC to teach different regulators about blockchain tech and other fintech. I spoke at the SEC a few weeks ago in DC, and then I'm going to Kazakhstan, I guess in 2 weeks, to speak with officials at the AIFC And also, yeah, we travel quite a lot to talk to different regulators and try to get them to understand the potential of the technology, because things people don't understand, they fear, and it's important to keep a cool head about the technology and make the best use of it.
I mean, we just had the G20 meeting of finance ministers here, right? And this was the statement around FinTech or TechFin, maybe in this case, rather than the dominance that might be a threat. And that's where the fear comes through if kind of the technology companies become dominant in the finance space.
Well, finance is undergoing a very interesting change right now anyway. Banks have, far more reserves with central banks now than they have in a long time, and or if ever. And they're making much less money than they used to, especially in the Eurozone with negative interest rates. And I was also looking at Japanese government bond yields, and they're just like a joke, right? Unless you go up to like 20 years, you don't make any money. And so it's really hard. And if you combine this with increasing regulatory costs, so in the past 15 years, bank profitability has halved, and then at the same time, compliance costs have doubled. So it's a really bad situation for many banks. And if you combine this with fintech or digital tokens, where not the banks but the users have control over their token, then that's another risk for banks. And so we actually are trying to solve this in our interbank system, SoraNet, by providing something similar to like staking in a way. So if a user is affiliated with your bank and they keep this stablecoin in their wallet for some time, the bank actually gets a token minted, by a smart contract, and so they can make some interest rate, and the interest rate is determined algorithmically by the to stabilize the economy. So if you want to encourage hoarding, then you increase I, and if you want to encourage dehoarding or increase the velocity of money, then you decrease I. And so that's done by a program and not by people, which is kind of cool. But this is a way for banks to actually make more money than they could, in government bonds or minus yield assets.
I mean, there's all the compliance costs, isn't there? Like an opportunity as well, if you think about digital securities or security tokens, where you essentially program all the compliance rules in, so it doesn't happen after the fact. It's basically built into the transaction, which should kind of reduce the costs that we have right now.
Okay, so some of that is possible. Some things are hard, like reporting. You have to do different reports to authorities, and the format is different in each country, which is a little bit difficult. But what we're doing with D3 is trying to create a new class of international assets. So we're working with NSD, which is the CSD in Russia. So they're the central securities depository, and what they do is they hold all the corporate papers and different bonds that are issued. And this is the concept of CSD is kind of old. In the past it was all paper. So when you had physical paper, it's dangerous to store it yourself. So you'd put it with a custodian or a central securities depository. So all these different countries have their own CSDs. In Japan, we've got JASDEC, for instance. These if they don't change anything, they'll eventually be disintermediated, potentially. Though they do have a lot of regulatory protection. But there's also a huge opportunity for CSDs to come together and build a new type of international platform, which we call D3. And this is a decentralized digital asset cloud, in a way. So you can have different types of digital assets that are managed globally, and then different CSDs run the different nodes. And so what we're hoping is to increase the efficiency of certain products. So, for example, Russian depository receipts or DRs are traded a lot in London, but they're actually held, the base asset is held in Moscow at the NSD, and then there's a settlement system through Euroclear, which goes to London Stock Exchange Group. And one thing that's potentially interesting is being able to automate this type of process. So instead of having to have this complex DR that has to be managed by some institution like a bank or even like a clearing house, it'd be nice to have this just a digital asset. And if you have the asset in the wallet, you have the asset, like from a legal standpoint. So this is going to take a while for regulators to all accept. In Switzerland, actually, it's very progressive because they have this security token type. So I think Switzerland will probably be the base for D3 for a while because of that. But we're hoping that in the EU we can do a lot of things as well. So we're talking with other CSDs in other countries. KDD in Slovenia, which is a part of the EU, has been really helpful as one of the partners. And they've been able to talk to the regulator a lot directly. And larger countries, I guess it's harder to talk to the regulator more. So it's going to take some time. But I see Europe as being much more positive in this stance than America because this is potentially disruptive in many ways, and American institutions, I think, are kind of scared of too much disruption. That's my my impression from the people I've talked to.
Well, I think we could go on for a few hours given all your activities, but given how little time you actually have back in Japan, really appreciate you joining us here today. We've been live from Shinjuku, and just to reiterate, there was a call for talent baked into this at some point. I think you said you could at least be double the size given all your projects. So for any talented blockchain engineers out there, you know where to go if you want to be part of this journey.
Great.
So thanks very much, Takemiya-san. This was fabulous, and hopefully in a year's time or so we can do this again and we hear all the updates of all the implementations across the board. Lots of progress has been made, and good luck for the journey going forward.
Yeah, thanks. Arigatou gozaimasu.